a biblical perspective on life, culture, and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, it's Friday and Bill Muehlenberg from Culture Watch joins us as always. Bill, another attempted assassination on former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, scary stuff. 2 in 2 months. There is a question, have any other American either presidents or candidates faced two such attempts on their life? And the question also, will there be more? Obviously, something's a bit amiss with the American security system, whether the Secret Service, FBI, local law enforcement, many are doing a great job, but twice in a row now, when people can get this close with, these kind of weapons to somebody that important, you really got to ask a huge amount of questions, and half of our questions haven't been answered from the previous shooting. There's still so much we don't know, and we have to wonder what's going on. So, yeah, it's look, if nothing else, it's a spiritual battle. Whether you like Trump or not, we should pray for his protection. We should pray that he's kept safe. These are scary times indeed.
Well, I think you're right, and I think it's almost looking like God is protecting him. So it's like Gamaliel said in the book of Acts, be careful of these men. Yeah. Well, be careful of this man, lest you be found to be fighting against God, because I'm not aware. I did a degree in history and focused on U.S. history. I'm not aware of any other U.S. presidents that have actually had two attempted assassination attempts on them. This could be a first, Bill, but let's hope and pray it is the last, but nothing would surprise me in what's going on in America right now.
Yeah, well, it's a worry, and it's, the funny thing is the left, the Democrats, Kamala, they keep saying we got to tone down their rhetoric, but it's exactly because for, years now, we've been told that Trump is a threat to democracy, an existential threat to America. He's another Hitler, he's a dictator. We've got to do everything we can to stop this man. And then, surprise, surprise, people come along. Guess what? I'm going to do something to stop this man, right? I mean, look at what they're saying. If you really believed he was another Hitler, I would think most people would think we have a moral obligation to stop Hitler. It's our duty to stop him. So you get incessant rhetoric from the left telling us what a demonized horror this man Trump is. Are we surprised we're getting all these people coming out? And by the way, they're, clearly the most recent shooter. He's got his Kamala T-shirt on. So they're clearly lefties. They're imbibing of all this hate speech and rhetoric. And, the Dems keep saying, we got to tone it down. It'd be nice if they started toning it down. We might see a lot less shootings if they started acting responsibly.
Yeah, well, let's not hold our breath, Bill, because I don't think that's going to happen. But let's shoot across the pond. And I really like the piece you've written on your website. And if people aren't familiar with that, it's billmuehlenberg.com or Culture Watch. Scruton on the death of England. What a great piece, Bill. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, if you don't know Roger Scruton, English intellectual, Christian, conservative, wrote, I was just looking at my collection of his books. I must have at least 30, but he's probably written 50 books. A polymath, if you know the word. He knew about everything, whether it was music, art, history, politics, you name it. He was an amazing guy. So anyways, every once in a while, I like to pull out one of his volumes that have been sitting around, blow off the dust, and see how relevant they still are today. This book that I'm referring to was actually released in 2000, so 24 years ago. It's called England, an Elegy, in which he's saying, the England that I grew up in is quickly disappearing. Countries can obviously disappear from threats from without, enemies external. But as Scruton and many others have noted, England, like so many Western nations, are dying from within, right? Suicide, national suicide. We're killing ourselves. We have this enmity of our own past, our own values. There's all this guilt and all this, wringing of hands. Oh, England is such a horrible country, and America and the West are so horrible. We have to repent of all the wrong things we did, never giving credit for all the good things we did. I mean, one obvious quick example, right, as Scruton reminds us, right, a lot of people today who have zero education in England, just got the propaganda from the schools and the media, they'll say, oh, yeah, England, we were involved in that horrible slave trade. What most people today in England and elsewhere don't know, England was probably one of the first countries shocking the world to do everything it could to stop the slave trade, right? Even, its ships for years afterwards, after the laws were passed, were intercepting slave traders, bringing blacks back to their country and so on. We don't hear about this. We don't know about this because it's not being taught in our schools. The media is not running with it. Even our politicians are into self-flagellation, right? We have to repent of our gross evils. How about looking at a few of the good things we did? So that's the real gist of Scruton's book in a nutshell. He goes obviously into a whole lot more detail, but he was worried. He passed away a few years ago, but greatly worried about the once great England.
Yeah, there was that old song, Bill, There Will Always Be an England, and it really captured the spirit of England in the old days. And, in the First and Second World Wars, more than 1 million British young men, there were a few women, probably nurses and auxiliary stuff, but mainly men, died fighting for the UK, or really fighting for Britain. And you wonder today, Bill, would the young people of Britain be even willing to go and fight for their country? Do they believe in their nation enough to risk their lives, let alone lay down their lives?
Yeah, well, good question. And clearly, I would think most would not, just like most young Australians, most young Americans. Why? Again, we've had at least 50 years of indoctrination, propaganda, saying everything about how horrible the West is. We're full of horrible past and values, and we need to, look elsewhere for what's the right way to proceed. So they know nothing of their own past national heroes. They know nothing of the past greatness, as you say, young people giving their lives to keep freedom and democracy alive around the world. Well, America, again, with the slave trade, right? Guess what? We fought a whole civil war. Hundreds of thousands of Americans were killed. Why? Because, among other things, they were trying to take on the slave trade and say, this is wrong to enslave blacks. You don't hear that in our American history classes. You don't hear that on our Australian ABC, SBS, right? Melbourne Age, Sydney Morning Herald. All you hear about is how horrible America is. It's still a racist country. We're still terrible. We need to make reparations, the whole bit. So on and on it goes. When you have a generation of kids raised under that rhetoric, under that self-loathing, under that hatred of the very things that made America, Australia, England great, well, yeah, who would lift an arm to go defend it in that case?
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound like a good idea to me to risk your life for something you don't believe in. And, I mean, you say that there's been national suicide in England, but it's far more sinister than that, isn't it? There's an agenda here, isn't there? There are people literally trying to destroy Western capitalist democracy, aren't there?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, Scruton, of all people, certainly knew all about this and wrote constantly about it. Again, the enemies are not without, the enemies are within. So whether you talk about cultural Marxism or a whole range of issues, you've got, critical theory, it's called, as part of the cultural Marxism, the idea we have to criticize everything, rip apart everything about the West is wrong and bad and evil. So if you get, again, 50 years of nonstop criticism, critique, telling you how bad everything is, well, that's a good way to self-destruct. That's a good way to see national suicide. And again, we have politicians and leaders and those in the media and academia happy to push this. They hate England. They hate America. Hate to say it. They hate Australia. They want to remake it into their own image, which is often a Marxist radical image, which has never worked anywhere, by the way. Where it's tried, it simply enslaved the masses, starved the masses while the elites lived the good life. And yet some of these people still think it's the wave of the future and it's the way England must go, Australia must go. So, yeah, there are people committed to the destruction of the West, and that's why we need to be vigilant.
Yeah, and you say that, these people hate Australia, they hate the West, and I'd go deeper than that, Bill. I'd suggest that they hate God as well. And as David said, why do the nations rage and the people plot vain things? It's nothing new, isn't it? This is a rage against God himself, isn't it? And against the principles that he gave to the world through his word.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost a truth to say that for most of these radical lefties, they are also radical secularists, atheists, God haters. Sure, not everyone, but probably most. So they do go together. When you hate God, you hate the good things he has made. Now, as both Scruton said in this book and as I repeated in my article about his book, does England have its faults, right? Have there been weaknesses, errors, wrong things that England has done? Well, of course, there is no perfect nation. There is no pristine country. Everyone has got some issues. America, Australia have their faults as well. But compared to the communist hellholes, and I think we can put it that way, compared to, say, Muslim majority nations, come on, these are some of the greatest, freest, most prosperous nations on earth. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's something worth celebrating, affirming, and promoting, and not feeling guilty about. It's good to be free. It's good to have a democracy. It's good to have the rule of law. All these things are hated by the enemies, but I think we can rightly celebrate them. Sure, there's always room for improvement, always room to correct things, but generally speaking, give me the West any day of the week over much of the rest of the world.
Well, and give any migrant or any refugee the West, because last time I checked, not one of the 42 Muslim nations in the world has a flood of migrants rushing to move there. Communist China does not have a flood of migrants. Putin's Russia doesn't have a flood of migrants. North Korea doesn't. The only countries that the migrants want to come to is the West, and that speaks for itself what is best, and it's definitely the West, Bill. But Bill Muehlenberg from Culture Watch, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and any listeners who want to tap into what Bill is doing, he writes some amazing blogs on his website. It's billmuehlenberg.com, or search up Culture Watch on the internet and you will find Bill and his really insightful, encouraging and practical blogs that he writes. Bill, thank you for joining us again on 2020 Today.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.